In this lesson, we'll talk about the comparator interface in Java. We'll also talk about how it relates to comparable interface that we have also introduced earlier. This work also relates to some of the collections data structures that we'll speak about in other lessons. Okay, so recall that we had an interface called comparable to compare two objects of the same type, right? Two data objects or two geometric shape objects, two circle objects, for example, right? So comparable is a generic interface that a class implements, and it is defined as so. There is a compareTo method that must be implemented if you're implementing, must be defined if you're implementing this interface. Now, what does a compareTo do? compareTo compares an object that is passed in with the object that is implementing this interface, right? It compares them. It returns a negative number if the object that's implementing it is less than the object that's passed in, 0 if they're equal, and positive if it is greater than, right? E is the generic type that is replaced by the concrete type when implementing the interface, right? I think we had mentioned in other lessons that many Java objects implement this interface, like for example, the wrapper classes integer double and things, and other things such as calendar and string and date and all that good stuff. If we, as an example, like a slightly more concrete example of date class, it would would have a declaration implementing comparable in using a date as the concrete type, right? Okay, and then it would have to implement compareTo, right? Now, one advantage of implementing comparable, that if you implement it and then hence you have the compareTo method available, you can use Java util array sort to sort them, right? So that's an advantage that you get. This will be especially important, when we talk about collections, right? Sorting collections, it comes into play. Okay, now what if a class you're using a class, but it happens that it does not implement comparable, right? In this case, you can define a class that implements the comparator interface, right? And override its compare method, right? The compare method that for it is defined as follows. Now, unlike previously where compareTo only needed one, this takes two elements of the same type and again returns a negative number if the first one is less than the other, positive number if the second one is less than the other, and 0 if they are equal, right? So let's take an example. Like, so we had created in a previous lesson, we had created our own class called geometric objects, which was a superclass to circle and rectangle and things like that. And it did not implement comparable, right? So if you wanted to compare two geometric objects, then we would have to implement comparator, right? To a new class, right? So let's see what that would look like, right? So we would define a new class called geometric object comparator and implement this comparator interface using geometric object as the concrete type. Okay, and then because of that, we have to implement compare, passing in two objects of geometric type. Now, what does it mean to compare two geometric objects? We can have our own semantics, and in our case, we're saying if we're comparing two geometric objects, we'll use the area. So we'll compare the area of a circle and a rectangle, and whichever one has the bigger area, that's the bigger object, right? So we get the area of both. Get area will work regardless of if it was a rectangle or a circle or a square, and then we will return a -1 or 0 or 1 depending based on the comparison, right? And then using this, then you could actually put it into practice. In this case, we create a rectangle and we create a circle, right? And since they're both geometric objects and we have dynamic types, that we can do this. So we define a comparator object, and that gives us this compare, and we are now allowed to compare them, right? So two notions being introduced: interface called comparable, which you can use if someone implements comparable. If that's not available, you define a new object, a new class that implements comparator, implement the compare type, and then you can compare them, right? So, all right, thank you.